Arc Raiders is redefining the extraction shooter with its stunning maps, innovative robotic enemies, and emergent social interactions that reward team play while making room for heartbreaking ganking and griefing. We sat down with Embark Studios art director Robert Sammelin in Los Angeles to chat about creative player behaviour in Arc Raiders, how the studio digests incredible amounts of feedback, and what future lies ahead for one of 2025's most popular games. Make sure you stick around to the end to hear his fascinating comments on how your behaviour in-game affects matchmaking. We started by asking about the unique art direction in Arc Raiders.
We set out to sort of establish and explain the world, more so for us as we were developing, but also sort of in terms of how the players experience it, that it's multi-layered. There are these remnants of our current day, which is in way in the past in the game, and then towards what would be the future for us is when mankind opted to get out and move into space, and building upon things that are inherently recognizable from today, and we added on top these sort of brutalist and inspired structures and all those things, but making that balance really well and make this sort of appeal of it. It's like moss or grass peeking through concrete, that it sort of beautifies it in a way that it provides this beautiful decay, if you will. And that's I think a powerful contrast with the brutalism and the chaoticness of nature and how those mean. The notion of a post-apocalyptic world comes with a territory that it's bleak and it's dark and it's gloomy, and we made the conscious decision to, like we're saying, that this is in the post-apocalypse. So would we sort of balance this kind of dreary, really dark premise with, an inviting treatment, and that was important to us. But we made a decision early on that we wanted to sort of dig into figuring out what the ratio is of relatability and sort of the unknown, how big a degree of sci-fi-ism that we can apply to something that is inherently understandable and relatable, and again with sort of balancing this dark premise with sort of inviting and charm. We opted for really sort of striking colors and sort of bold fashion, drawing from loads of inspirations throughout history, through pop culture, anything that works.
The shadows in Arc Raiders often conceal threats, so radically affect your playstyle. We asked about the importance of playing with light and shadow in the design of Arc Raiders maps.
Yeah, it was crucial to sort of define these maps, because it's part of this whole sort of contrasting of making sure that there is always these spots that light for tension and even horror at times, and balancing this in between. And we found out fairly early on that the play with contrasts of moving in from light and dark and utilizing the darkness to sort of instill a special mood or sort of opportunities and perils for the player was key to it. So it's very deliberate in every map that we have.
I love that you said horror. To me, playing style, it's a horror there.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Low-key horror.
How much did the gameplay on certain maps influence their design and art style?
Some of them are, stemming and trace back to the very first iteration of the game, and of course rejigged and redone and reconfigured to work for the game that it currently is. And other maps have been built specifically for this. And there's quite a vast difference in experience that you can have in these worlds. Some are geared more towards a sort of opening up for more PvP. I'm personally terrified of Stella Montis. I play a lot of solo, but then I play with my brothers and coworkers and friends. Stella Montis is you need to be prepared for it. You need to sort of boost yourself. I have a real soft spot for the Dam. I think it's the sort of perfect, most well-rounded one for the experience of the game, because it's also the first map that you engage with. But I also have a very sort of strong love for Bird City, for what it is, the complexity of it, the sort of the looks of it, the way that you sort of move in and out of buildings. It prompts for that curiosity in a sort of a higher degree, curiosity per minute than most maps.
Arc Raiders had a lengthy development. Was there a moment when the game we know today revealed itself to the developer?
I mean, through the years and the different iterations, there have been many. But if we're looking at Arc Raiders, what it is right now, it was fairly early on after the pivot of playing around with these systems, where we could see that shifting the scale, the balance between you almost together overpowering Arc, but seeing that shift into the lethality of Arc, and then introduced to the other players in there, finally striking that balance of friend or foe within anyone you meet against this sort of common enemy. That's, for me, when I felt this really clicked and has something I've not really experienced before.
How surprised have you been at the creativity of players?
That was part of even the DNA of the early versions of Arc Raiders, to have this capabilities of using gadgets and the tools and all these things at your sort of disposal and be creative with them. The game has been in development for a long time. We've, of course, tested and tried out things throughout the years, but whenever you launch a game and see the players utilizing, especially the physicality of a game like this, it is genuinely surprising, but it's mostly delightful things. I think that we've seen players do things that we've tested out, but to a whole different level. It's also really useful for us to find ways to tweak and patch and fix.
Yeah.
And there's quite a few things that have taken us by surprise. Other things are sort of more or less known, because you have to continuously find ways to sort of more waterproof the experience and figure out how to mitigate anything that is either generally damaging exploits or just general bugs.
Teamwork, pacifist builds, and social interaction have become huge parts of the appeal of Arc Raiders for many players. We wanted to know how much of this was intended and whether Embark wants to encourage this style of play.
Internally, we were hoping that we would strike this balance of having people almost apprehensive on how they're going to interact with other people. But there is this tension, this underpinning of threat, but also the sort of the greater threat, the exterior one with the Arc, would perhaps invite to these sort of cooperative scenarios. But I think internally, playtesting with devs, we're way worse people than the community when it comes to how we engage in combat. We were certainly hoping that we would see this happen, but I think to the extent that it happened at launch and seeing how people treat each other socially is heartwarming, and I think it's really uplifting to see. For what this game is, you don't choose a play style with a certain sort of capabilities or such. It's up to each player to sort of equip and adapt to each scenario. The different maps open for and allow for very different sort of play styles, and depending on what kind of gear or gadgets you bring in, you can sort of use them to your advantage more on certain maps than others. I think there's lots to be said about the armaments and gadgets that you bring. I think it is something that we want to explore with each sort of subsequent map update and new maps, to see what else we can bring to the sort of palette that we paint from.
Some people in the Arc Raiders community have suspected that player behaviour has a tangible impact on matchmaking, with more peaceful, cooperative players being matched together on some servers, whilst others are filled with more violent players. Embark has never publicly confirmed this, but Sammelin hinted our suspicions were correct.
No, it is, without going into sort of excruciating detail, it is...
We'll take the detail.
It is quite complex. So we do analyze behavior and match accordingly.
You can't say anymore.
No. We got some figures on how many people have even downed another player, and they were surprisingly low at sort of a large scale. But there's also quite a different experience in playing with a squad or solo that we see this is a difference in between, and I think that also opens up for a very kind of different experience depending on how you choose to engage with the game from the get-go. Of course, data is great. The amount of just data that we get from telemetry is really helpful in finding out what we should be addressing or tweaking or tuning, and pairing it up with sort of internal assumptions. I mean, it's invaluable when it comes to tuning and balancing, because that's something that we will keep doing continuously.
What thought goes into introducing new Ark to the game?
Sort of a game like this, that everything that is introduced, you need to consider the measure and then the countermeasure. And seeing how people engage with Ark, I think we've learned quite a lot on how they sort of have chosen to sort of combat them. You can learn a great deal from that and figure out what the sort of countermeasure to these measures are. We've started with a fairly sort of slim roster of Ark, and that's of course something that we're expanding over time. Again, sort of measure and countermeasure, and sort of different avenues open up for different types of behaviors with even the Ark as well.
And finally, we asked what the future holds for Ark Raiders.
I mean, looking at other games, I think there are loads of lessons to be had and analyze what could go wrong. For sure, there are loads of pitfalls that you can sort of at least prevent. One lesson is, of course, of having a robust anti-cheats from the start and making sure that there is a lot of sort of good housekeeping being done on a regular cadence with having a sort of a live product in place. That's kind of crucial. There's one thing of course, updating the maps over time so they don't grow stale on time, because we don't have a whole lot of maps from the get-go. We'll add more, sort of updating it, but the map conditions is another one that sort of changes the rule sets a bit and changes the sort of basic loot economy and enemy behaviors, and there are pros and cons for these. And that's something that we're exploring more and more over time, so what we can add to it. We had almost this 10-year plan. This is our ambition, to keep this game alive for the longest time. Even though it is a sort of paid game, it is a live game. It's something that we want to keep alive for the longest time possible, as long as players engage with it and have fun and see that it's evolving in a good way. I think games like these will evolve depending on sort of community behaviors, community feedback, and picking out the things that we see people engage really well with, but also throw things into the mix that sort of afford new challenges and some new opportunities within the game. I think there's a wide range of routes that we can take with this, and in time will tell how we sort of dig into it, but we for sure have a pretty long-standing plan of where we want to take it.
Thank you to Robert for providing some insight on one of the year's most interesting shooters, and to you for watching. Make sure you check out our Ark Raiders guides to make the most of your runs, and for more in-depth interviews like this, subscribe to PC Gamer.